Welcome to Stories by Faith. I'm Faith Hickson, and this is Lesson 2 of Depths of Grace, the life of John Newton. For this story, the verse that we're learning from God's Word together is from 1 Corinthians 6, 1 and 2. And let's say this last part together, will you? Behold, now is the favorable time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. And we learned last week about grace and God's grace, how He shows it in the world of creation, and how grace was able to be seen by all that way. And this week, we're going to learn about some more ways God's grace was shown in the life of John Newton. Last week, we sang this special song that was a song written by children by Dr. Isaac Watts. Let's sing that again. I sing the mighty power of God that made the mountains rise, that spread the flowing seas abroad and built the lofty skies. I sing the wisdom that ordained the sun to rule the day. The moon shines full at His command, and all the stars obey. I sing the goodness of the Lord that filled the earth with food. He formed the creatures with His word and then pronounced them good. Lord, how Thy wonders are displayed where'er I turn my eye. If I survey the ground I tread, or gaze upon the sky. Good singing. Next week, maybe we can add another verse to that song. But let's get ready with our story. Get started. Remember, John is from England, and he lived in the town of Wapping, which was on the Thames River. And last week when we met John, remember that his mother had passed away, and he had got to go to boarding school, and then he was able to go with his dad on a sea voyage. And while they were waiting for the voyage to begin, he had the opportunity to sneak off with some of the other sailors and to get to the harbor and go out to see a warship, the HMS Victory. And John was trying so hard to get there on time. He was urging his horse on, go faster, go faster. And when he got to the edge of the water, he saw that the boat was already rowing out toward the ship. He had missed his opportunity to go to the warship. He was so disappointed. And as he watched the sailors try to row out to the ship, all of a sudden, what should he see but a big wave came up and knocked the ship over. It knocked every one of those sailors out into the sea. Now, as strange as this sounds to us, sailors weren't very good swimmers. Many of them didn't know how to swim at all, and they didn't have life jackets with them. The boat was too far from the shore for them to get back, and it was too far from the ship for the ship to be able to send a boat to rescue them. And as John watched, every fellow that was in that boat went under the water, never to be seen again. John thought, what if I had been on that boat? In the weeks that followed, as he went back to his ship, and as the boat finally set sail, and what looked like a big boat to him seemed tiny as it was out in the ocean, he often thought about what would have happened if he had made it to that boat on time. What would have happened if he had been toppled into the sea, because he wasn't a good swimmer either. John knew that it was only the hand of God, God's grace, that kept him from getting to the shore on time. That if he had gotten there, he too would have drowned. Now, he didn't think about God very much, but He knew that it was only God that had kept him safe at that time. Well, and as he was there and as time went by, John went on 5 sea voyages with his dad. That's a lot, isn't it? And as our story continues today, John is sitting across the desk from his dad, and his dad is not very happy with him. He says, "John, you've done nothing. You've been on 5 sea voyages with you. I got you a job keeping books and accounts for a big company, but you quit because it was too boring. You would probably be reading all those books you want to read, all those stories about people who are just eating and drinking all the time." He said, "This is real life. And in real life, people have to work. They have to make a living. You've got to try harder." John knew that he didn't act like he was sorry. His dad would never stop fussing at him. So he said, "Well, I'm sorry, Dad. I'm just not cut out to be a sea captain like you are." And his dad said, "Well, I've got another job opportunity for you, John." He said, "Mr. Joseph Manistee has offered to take you to Jamaica with him. He owns a huge sugar plantation there, and he says you can help him manage that. And John, in 4 or 5 years, when you've learned how to do that, he says he will make you the manager. John, you could be very wealthy and make lots of money doing that. You sail in 3 weeks." As John thought about that, he liked the idea of making a lot of money, and he was thinking about it, and his dad said, "And John, I have a job I want you to do in the next 3 weeks to keep you busy." He said, "You have some business. I have some business I need you to take care of for me in Kent. And then on your way back, I want you to stop by your mother's cousins, the Catlets. They've been wanting to meet you." Well, 2 weeks later, John is finished with his dad's work. He has 1 week before he sails. He said, "Whew, I want to meet these cousins and get it over with." So he arrived at their house and he knocked at the door. And when the door opened, it was opened by a young girl, just a few years younger than John. He had never seen anyone so beautiful. He could hardly speak. I'm John. I'm John Newton." Well, this was Polly Catlett was her name, and John had fallen in love. The Catlets were delighted to meet him. His mother had been their cousin, and they invited him to stay as long as he wanted to. So John stayed 3 whole weeks. Now, boys and girls, do you remember when his ship was supposed to sail? That's right, only 1 week when he started to the Catlett's house. So sure enough, he had missed his ship to Jamaica. He just wanted to be with Polly, and whatever John wanted to do, he just did it because he was the most important thing to him. John's dad was furious with him. He had gotten him this great job, and he said, "Well, I'm going to get you another job." And a friend of mine said that you can go on the ship with him to sail the Adriatic Sea. He said, "But you're just going to be a common sailor. You won't have any privileges." John had given up an opportunity to have a pretty nice job. He had missed that, and so now he was going to go on a ship as a sailor without any privileges. Well, John did learn to be an able seaman. That means he learned the ropes of being a sailor, but he also learned many sinful, wicked habits. Many of the sailors drank alcohol heavily and cursed, and John picked up those habits. He was gone for over a year on this ship, and as soon as he came back, he just could not wait to get to the Catlets. His dad didn't understand. Why was he so obsessed about his mother's cousins? What was going on? All he could think about was being back with Polly. Well, his dad said, "You need to be back on time here, John. I've arranged for you to sail with Mr. Dawes. He's a friend of mine, and he's going to allow you to be an officer on his ship. Now, an officer wouldn't have as hard a duty, and he'd be in charge of other men, and he'd make more money. This was a pretty good opportunity for John. But once again, John ignored his responsibilities and stayed with the Catlets for over a month. He missed this opportunity to sail as an officer with Mr. Dawes. What would his dad think? He wanted to marry Polly, but he didn't have a job, and he knew that Polly's parents wouldn't let her marry someone who didn't have a job or a position. What could he do? So one day, he decided he would go to the town of Chatham and just go for a walk around the sea and along the town of Chatham. And he thought he could think better as he walked along and looked at the ocean. So he traveled to this town by himself. And as he was walking along, he noticed that there was 3 men were following him. And the 3 men said, "Looks like this guy is lost. How can we help him?" And he noticed that one of them was wearing a blue jacket, which means he was an officer in the Navy. Well, right now the country of England is about to go to war with the country of France at this time in their history. And they didn't have enough men to sail on their boats. The Navy needed men to be sailors. And rather than asking people if they wanted to help out, the officers would walk around towns and they would find young men that looked able-bodied, and they would press them. They would grab them and take them and make them be sailors on the ship. And that's what happened to John that day. These men grabbed him and said, "It looks like this gentleman's looking for an opportunity to serve Her Majesty on the ship, the Harwich." Before he knew it, he was caught by this press gang, and he was called a volunteer by them. His father got word, but even his father couldn't help and get John released from this. He sailed away on the Harwich. And you know something? 4 days after he sailed away, England and France were at war. John was soon promoted on the ship to be called a midshipman because he worked hard and he got better food and treatment. But once again, John wasted this opportunity. He treated the soldiers under him poorly and is disrespectful. And when the Harwich came into port one time, he had a 1-day pass to go to shore. But instead, he took 10 days, and went to see Polly. He certainly wasn't doing his part to keep his word and to be an officer. And when he got back to the ship, the captain of the ship talked to him and said, "I'm going to demote you. You'll just be a common sailor. You need to listen. We need to be able to trust you." And he was silent and rude this whole time. He didn't speak to him, and he didn't respond in a way that was appropriate. And another officer took him aside and he said, "John, it's going to be a long trip to the East Indies if you are demoted from your position. You need to listen to him and you need to shape up." East Indies, John thought. That's halfway, that's on the other side of the world. I won't see Polly for 4 or maybe 5 years if our ship sails to the East Indies. Oh my goodness. So John devised a secret plan. He started to be very helpful. He did his job well, and the officers began to notice it. And the officers talked to him and they said, "Your turnaround is remarkable, John. You've become a good sailor. We're going to go into the port at Plymouth before we sail, and the captain would like you to take 3 other men to go in to get the supplies for the ship." This was the opportunity John was hoping for. The day came, and the sailors and John got into the longboat and rowed into the port at Plymouth. Now, Plymouth wasn't too far from where John's dad lived. And John thought, if I can get to my dad, maybe he can help me. And so he borrowed a horse from a farmer and changed his clothes and started riding toward where his dad lived, or where he thought his dad was. He wasn't as familiar with that area as he should be, and when he came to one spot, there was 2 roads he could take. He didn't know which one to take, so he chose one and started riding. And when he went around the bend, there was a group of soldiers that were standing in the road. Next lesson, we'll hear what happens to John as he meets the soldiers in the road. Thank you.